A more effective person at home is a more effective person in the office, right? And if I can affect that whole person and I can impact that whole person, that's what leadership is. Leadership isn't just dragging the business through good seasons and bad seasons, right? We sometimes lose the plot on this, right? And it's like, oh, it's just getting the business from point A to point B. It's not at all.
Hey everyone, it's time for Design Development, your hub to learn direct from top professionals in real estate design, development, and construction. I'm your host, Rens Hayes, founding partner, H&O, lifelong learner, obsessed with high-powered organizations and the leaders that guide them. If this is your first time on the show, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you're a returning guest, can't thank you enough. Let's get to the show. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Looking forward to it. You're episode 1. There's no one else I would have rather had here for it.
Awesome. Now that sets the bar high. Now we need to perform.
Now we got to perform.
So
you and I have a kind of a shared background in that we grew up around a family business. Our fathers both ran family businesses. Yours is third generation. So previously it was your father and your uncle running the business, right? And then it was before that was your grandfather?
Yep, my grandfather and great uncle. So the two
and
pairs
great
of brothers.
uncle, and they founded the business.
Yeah. So my grandfather and my great uncle Joe and Frank. Joe was my grandfather. They founded the business. They were both first generation Italian immigrants. So they were born here. Their older siblings were born in Italy. My grandfather had a lot of opportunity when he was young, like even really young. Because he was the only one that was truly bilingual in the family. He was the first one born in the United States. So he got taken to every like adult thing that my great grandfather had to go to because Joe, my grandfather, spoke English. So he, as a 4-year-old, as a 5-year-old, as a 6-year-old, he got carted around everywhere. And that kind of carried through life. He was exposed to a lot of things. Ultimately, kind of in their late teens, early 20s, Joe and Frank founded this business, at the time, Procopio Construction, focused on, in the very beginning, kind of residential renovations. They moved quickly into housing, quickly into larger scale single-family subdivisions, some apartments over the years, and then my dad and uncle ran the business really from through the 2000s. And Greg and I bought the business. Greg and Mark and I, three brothers, bought the business from them in 2016.
Wow. And so if you go back, so the three of you buy this business from your dad and your uncle. Did your uncle have any kids?
He has five boys. Yeah, we're a big boy producer.
Five boys.
There's four boys in my family, 5 boys in my uncle's. Yeah.
And so were they interested in the business at all? Were they involved?
Yeah, a couple of them work in the business. Yeah. So Nate, my uncle's oldest, one of my cousins, Nathan, runs our site operations team. A couple of the other boys have worked off and on in the business at different times on the site side, but yeah, very, very much so.
So when we say family-led business, this has got a big family component to it.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, like, what was life like in the Procopio home growing up? Was it really competitive? Was like Procopio companies like almost like a part of your home life too? Was it topic of conversation at dinner? Were you working there as a young kid?
Yeah. Yeah, so it wasn't super competitive. It was always there, right? It was always the thing, right? I mean, it was the engine for everything, right? But it wasn't then what it is now, right? So it wasn't this rapidly growing, everybody knew it kind of business. It was a local. I grew up, north of Boston in Saugus, so certainly everybody in our hometown knew who we were and knew the name and saw the trucks all over the place. But that was really the extent of it. It wasn't this big thing. But for sure, growing up, I mean, I was we won't send this to OSHA, but I was certainly running equipment when I was pre-teens. I was working on landscape crews, working on framing crews. Yeah. So, it's the quintessential family business in a lot of ways, especially in the trades where you grow up doing this stuff, right? I was the 14-year-old kid that my mom would pick up at school, would have my toolbox in the back of her car, drop me at one of our apartment buildings, and I would do what at the time we called apartment complaints, maintenance requests, after school for 3 or 4 hours, and I'd go knock on the doors as a 14-year-old kid and fix the disposals and fix the lights and replace the toilets and do all that kind of stuff. So that's definitely how I grew up in the business. It was a lot of hard work and not a lot of fun. And as you know, working for your dad, no less your uncle or your great uncle or your grandfather, all of whom I worked for at different times, is really not a lot of fun. So, but you learn a lot, and it builds a lot of character. And the direction we've taken the business in today, there's not many days that go by that I'm not leaning on something that I learned, frankly, as a teenager in this business, for sure.
Right. Growing up in a family business, it seems like you had the same experience. Like, I really saw what hard work was. Like, there was no failure because my dad would have to drop dead for him to fail. He would just outwork whatever mistake ever happened. Like, he just saw like a true grind.
Yeah.
I actually remember, and I felt ashamed about this shortly after, when I grew up working in the shop, right? So middle school, high school, I was fabricating, I was running beam lines or welding. And when I was younger, I was sweeping. They called me piles at work because I hated picking up the piles of dirt. So I just left piles everywhere. I just sweep the floor for like a week straight and be done with it. But that's not here or there. So in going through, like, as I was going up, everyone's like, hey, you're just going to go work for your dad? Are you just going to take over your dad's business? Like, hey, you got a family business, like your future is kind of, and I'd be like, nah, I'm not going to do the steel thing. Not going to do the steel thing at first. And that experience actually ended up launching me towards structural engineering, because we were building, my dad's business is structural steel, fabricating and install. And so I was like, he's building the business. Everyone thinks I'm just going to go ride his coattails. And you hear about all the next generation businesses, like, it's actually more probable that those businesses fail. The stats show that those businesses typically fail. They don't continue to thrive. And so I was like, I'm not going to make this mistake thinking like I'm only going to go follow his path. I'm going to go try to learn how to design the buildings, and then we can add to it. And I see some of that similarity in yours, because not only were they were doing like their self-development single family homes at the time, right? And you at some point saw like, I got to add more to this, and I see where to carry this to the next level. And that was a bigger development, the multifamily stuff, right?
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, their bread and butter was single family homes. We were straight single family developers. We would buy the land, plot the subdivisions out, build the homes. And frankly, they were large scale subdivisions. So in this part of the country, as you know, we don't do 300, 400, 500 home subdivisions up here. We do like 10, 20, 30, 40. If you get 100 home subdivision, that's really big for the Northeast.
That's massive. Yeah.
It's massive for the Northeast, right? There's not land to do those big master plan communities like you get in other parts of the country. So we did. I mean, I worked in many subdivisions, 50, 40, 45, 50, 100, 110 home subdivisions. So we had these big subdivisions.
That's big scale for this area. That really is.
They were, but they paced them at such a pace that they only did a few houses a year. Right, it was very much a lifestyle business. Sure. There was not, and as it should be, right. That was what they wanted out of the business. Was they had security. They could look down the road and be like, "Hey, man, like I don't know what the economy's doing, but I still have 45 lots to build."
So there was land basis, right?
Right. There was this level of security that came with it. But it was very much lifestyle driven, where it was, if everybody got their paycheck and at the end of the day had some job security, that was what it was all about. We definitely wanted something different, both from kind of the self-satisfaction piece and just kind of the challenge of what can we do with this business? What else can we do that we're not doing? We're capable of a lot more.
Did you know even back in high school that you were going to work for the family business?
No, I did not want to work for the family business.
You didn't want to either?
No,
so
absolutely
what did
not.
you consider?
I went to school for criminal justice, Rens, which is a useful degree that I use every day. No,
that you use
not
every day. Okay, so criminal justice.
Criminal justice. I wanted to be a state trooper.
State trooper?
Yep. I wanted to work at the airport and just kind of walk around and look at people and, no. I did want to be a state trooper. I went to school for criminal justice. While I was in school, I was selling real estate on the side, and I'm very naturally suited to sales. We had a brokerage office. At one point, we had 25 agents that worked in our brokerage office. It was kind of a natural extension of building the homes is having a brokerage. You're selling them. It's a lot of for sale product. So I came up as an adult. I came up on that side of the business. My grandfather passed away in 2005. I was selling homes and had to kind of make a decision as to whether I was going to pursue the family business or not. I've been working for a couple of years full time, and ultimately decided to just go into the sales side, and that's what I did. And I didn't stay in sales that long, but that was the impetus for me coming into the family business.
Yeah. So the sales side, you were selling real estate while going to college. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's great. So selling real estate, you started to learn some of the opportunity, you learned the sales tactics. And is that where you started to see a connection to your skill set and the opportunity that you could create at Procopio companies?
Yeah, for sure. I was just honestly a little bit bored with it though, right? I was really good at it. I carved out a niche of being the new construction guy, whether it was my own product or someone else's, because I knew the construction product inside and out. I knew the architecture. I knew construction. I kind of had a leg up over a lot of other brokers that just kind of come through a traditional path in real estate. So I was able to add a lot of value to my clients. But really, I got bored with it, and I was watching a lot of other development happen. We were still building single-family homes. I was still running that part of the business. We were doing in like 2010 to 2015, we were probably doing 5 big houses a year, $1.5 million houses at the time. Kind of the McMansion game. And it was lots of customers, lots of frustrations, and not a lot of reward, right? I think people would be surprised at what the margins really are in that business, right? Building custom homes for people, kind of that mid-market, what I would call the white collar but not wealthy home market, right? It was doctors and lawyers and business owners. It wasn't billionaires that we were building houses for. Yeah. It's really skinny margins and really frustrating. And we kind of looked, I remember conversations with my brother Greg, and we're kind of looking around saying, we're smashing our head into the wall building these houses. At the end of the day, to maybe make $50,000 or $100,000 on a house that we worked on for a year or 10 months. That's ridiculous. We could be in the multifamily space, and we kind of looked at it and just bit down on our first build, other than a single family home, was a 42 unit apartment building, and it was wildly successful. And after that, we kind of looked at each other and said, we're never going back to single families. We have a pipeline we need to finish out, and we have customers that we need to make good on the contracts that we've signed, but we're never going back into the single family space. Ironically, now we're looking at getting back into that space, but as rentals. But the for sale single family product, I'll never go back there.
Yeah, and at a different volume, right?
Significantly different volume. Yeah.
A key lesson, I think, in perspective there, I'd like to point out is you recognized the talent that you had on your team and the capacity that you guys had. And you recognized that you were just serving the wrong market, right? Like the market was holding back your actual value opportunity and your actual earning potential. And I see a lot of people make the flaw. They're like, Alex Hormozy, we were just talking about him. He talks about having a level 10 talent chasing a level 2 opportunity. And if you have the talent for more and you're just chasing too small of an opportunity, you're going to try to solve all these problems thinking that's how you're going to earn more. And that's just not how it works. You're just going to bang your head against the wall trying to solve that problem.
That's 100% right. And the byproduct of that is also you're going to have really, really frustrated the level 10 talent that you have on your team, whether that's yourself or whether that's another team member, because what you're doing is you're containing them in a box that they weren't designed to be in. They weren't made to be in that box. Exactly. And that was a big shift for us. It still is a shift for us today, despite the volume of business we're doing and the size buildings we're doing. It becomes very obvious at times because of the scale and kind of the range of buildings that we do, as you know. It becomes very obvious to us at times when we have a level 10 talent chasing a level 2 opportunity. It still happens. It happens in every business. And I think it's a really, really astute point to watch that and understand what the downstream impacts are, not just on your business, but what are the impacts on your people when that's the box that you're putting them in.
And you, right? You as the business owner of business.
Right.
Couldn't agree more. The vision of the business has to be big enough so that the vision of the level 10 talent that they have for their career can fit inside the vision.
Inside of it. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Because if you're chasing too small of a market, they're like, there's no room for me. I'm not going to be able to achieve my goals.
Right.
And they're 100% right. So a big part of employee churn has been a huge, huge conversation over the last few years since COVID, right? And a lot of that can be like, how many companies actually have a defined vision where they're saying like, hey, over the next 5 years, here's where we're going.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, like your level 10 talent's going to question it. They might think that they're probably going to think less of what's possible, right? Because a lot of people overestimate what they can do in a year, but they underestimate what they can achieve in 5 or 10 years. And so if they judge their opportunity based on 1 year's worth of time, they're going to have overestimated how far they went, which means they're going to be frustrated. But if you paint a 5-year picture and you show the stages on how we're going to get there, it gives them a longer runway to build into their capacity of their career and reduce that resentment.
And in my experience, they'll get there in 3 years instead of 5.
Yeah. And I talk about goal setting, and I know you do the same thing. Is you set a 5-year vision, you see that you're going to hit it in 3, so you just move the goal. Like I think I'm moving goals before we ever even get there, right?
Yeah.
I want to come back to this timeline. So single family housing, you guys are doing great work, but see the frustration and the suppression of the market that you're chasing. About what year is this that you kind of recognize?
2000. So it started building, I would say by 2012 and 13, we knew that we were going to go a different direction. And then that progressively built until 16 when we bought the business.
And you bought the business. That was my next question. So you bought the business in 16. So you see the opportunity. You already started implementing the multifamily development before buying it?
Not before we'd made the decision to. Before we'd closed, we'd started working on a multifamily, but not really. Yeah, we lost no time.
Yeah, that's a good lesson too, right? Is you can't just buy a business in like a week or a month, especially if it's a family business.
Yeah.
I mean, if you bought a business in 90 would be about the absolute fastest, I think, and you'd have to have a real good reason to like shrink your due diligence period. But buying a business is going to take 6-12 months.
It took us a year.
I would say that's outstanding for a family
business. It took us a year to unpack it and really understand what we were doing, figure out how to structure it, and make sure we were comfortable with it. One of the things with a family business, without getting too far into weeds or details, is smaller family businesses. One of the factors is there's on one hand you have what's the business worth, right? What is the actual financial, what's the underlying enterprise value of the business? Well, that's price A. That's what I should pay for it. Then it's a family business. So you say, listen, I'm buying out people that matter to me and people that I care about and people that need to be financially secure potentially for the rest of their lives. That's another price. That's a different. Those prices are oftentimes with small family businesses not the same number.
Huge gap.
So in our case, we chose to go to option B, but then we had to kind of unpack that in our own minds and understand how we were going to get the business where it made sense to pay that price for the business. And ultimately, it obviously worked out. But at the time, I can tell you that was a really challenging hurdle to get over, and the understanding how a business is going to really, especially a business like ours that doesn't have, it's not a service business. There's not direct cash flows. It's very much development driven. How you're actually going to pay that nut or finance that purchase of the business it's a really big. It's the elephant in the room. It's a big deal.
Oh, for sure. People talk about the risk of going into their own business or buying a business. Like you're taking on a substantial like debt to buy this business, right? And then you're now responsible for advancing and growing a business while paying off this debt. It's a big monkey on the back.
Yeah, my brother Greg likes to say that when we bought the business, the amount that we had to, obviously we put a bunch of money down on it, and then we had a structured note to pay off the business over 5 years. And Greg likes to joke and say that the amount that we owed, the amount we had to pay to my uncle was a mortgage payment for each of us every day. And that was always Greg's way of like self-motivating, that it was like, forget about striving to make your nut every month on your mortgage payment. We each had a mortgage payment a day we had to make.
Yes.
But it forces you, I'll tell you what, it was really scary at the time. I mean, you know both me and Greg, there's a little bit of a difference in personality and kind of risk profile. We're very different in a lot of ways, very complementary.
That's healthy as a partner.
Yeah, very, very much so. But even for me, I'm generally very highly risk tolerant, right? I'm the aggressive developer side. I push all my chips into the table relatively easily. Greg is not like that. Greg is much more measured, much more cautious. I'll tell you, but even for me, for him as well, extremely motivating to have that pressure in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, it was a very healthy pressure. It forced us to grow the business. The cash flow of the business did not support the buyout, period, at all. Under no circumstances did it support the buyout. We couldn't just say, well, the cash flow of the business is going to pay it. The cash flow of the business wouldn't have paid it. So it forced us to grow through that season. It forced us to scale. It forced us to leave money in the business. It forced us not to kind of, one of the mistakes we see people making in business is they start to see some success and they start to strip the money out of the business really quickly, right? And suddenly it's the houses and the boats and the vacation homes and the lake house. And that stuff's all great. It just happens a little bit too early for most people. And it forced us to keep it all in, right? Because we were buying the business, we were scaling the business, we were growing the business in a very focused way. And it was really great that with Greg and I, we had that alignment to be able to look down the road and say, this stuff might come, but it's going to come later. Right now, we're gonna build the business. We're going to secure this. We're going to pay off we're going to finish the buyout, all those things.
I love that type of commitment. And for people at home, it's easy to look at the people that grew up in a family business and then took over the family business, and they just think like, oh, that was easy, right? Like that conversation is borderline impossible in terms of like ownership transition with family.
Yeah.
It is so hard. There is that gap, right? Is what's the business worth today? And a lot of times, like the mergers and acquisition world is an unbiased evaluation of your business value. So like what Mike's saying here is like the cash flow didn't pay for the price that we paid, but we wanted to pay this price to help our family, the people we care about, be set, right, and financially secure. Taking on that risk is like a tremendous effort. And it was not handed to you guys, right? You were betting on yourself and Greg and Mark to be able to take this business and grow it to what you saw the future Procopio. And you were willing to bet on that with that buyout.
Yeah, 100%. And we view ourselves a lot of ways, and it's not, look, I'm very, very blessed. I have a tremendous legacy that we built this business on, a tremendous name, a tremendous brand, and would not be here without the foundation laid by my dad and my grandfather and my uncles, right? So that's a fact. But
yes,
very much what we are today is an entrepreneurial startup compared to what we were, right? Yes, the Secretary of State says that our corporation was established in 1950. We very much, and you know this working with us, we very much view us as having been established in 2016, right? That's when we actually started doing what we're doing now. So while there's pieces we pull from that legacy, it's a radically different business. The banking relationships are different. The lawyers everything about the business is different. And while there's that legacy, I think a lot of times people, especially in longer running family business, get very beholden to the legacy, right? And they can't, as Greg likes to say, they can't shoot the sacred cows, right? So a big piece of this for us was an absolute willingness to shoot the sacred cows. We are building a business. We're building our business. Yes. I'm not building my grandfather's business. I'm not working in my grandfather's business. I'm building my business. We're building our culture, right? We're investing in our people. I'm not investing in my grandfather's people, right? And when you start to understand that break, I think it clarifies things in your own mind in terms of where you can go and what you can do versus, I don't want to use disparage. Like a lot of times in family business, it feels very, very constrained, very handcuffed, even when you're trying to transition to other generations, because there's a lot of influence from Gen 1 and Gen 2 that come into the mix. Yeah. My grandmother is still alive. I'm unconcerned. I want her to be proud of me. I don't think every day, what would she think about what decisions I'm making in the business, right? Yes. I don't at all. Right. Ditto for my dad, who still works in the business. Right. My dad still works with us. I'm not, while I respect his opinion and obviously his input, we're running the business. Right. We're strategically shaping the path forward. And I think that freedom is what has allowed us to grow. And in a lot of other businesses that we've watched transition as well, that freedom is really empowering.
Yeah. But it's great to hear you give the nod to the past generation too, right? Like obviously you guys are go-getters. You're doing all the right stuff. You're building a business. You're aggressive, yet you reduce your risk, right? You're creating high upside opportunities and reducing your risk as much as possible. But giving them the nod to say, like, we wouldn't be in the position to do what we're doing today without them is so important, right? And in that mentor-mentee relationship, father-son, it's like if we've all done our job right, the next generation should be able to go further than us, right? Because we've laid the foundation and learned the lessons and shared those lessons that give that next generation those new perspectives. So I'm sure they're sitting there today super proud and happy on where you guys are.
Yeah, it's a really astute point, because I think a lot of times I've certainly seen, so I'm in some family business peer groups. I'm very much active in this space. And I've seen a lot of family businesses where the previous generation doesn't want them to run further, right? That's seen as very like a challenge or a conflict that you're going to run beyond where I was able to go. For me, for my dad, and for my grandfather and my dad, that very much was the opposite. It was run further than me. You know, we took it to here, you guys take it to there, kind of a thing. And I think about my own kids. I have 3 boys. There's nothing I want more for them to be able to 10x what I've done, right?
Yes.
You know, I want to be able to sit around when I'm retired and be like, man, like I thought I had big vision and thought this was possible. This is way beyond what I ever thought was even possible. What a legacy to have. And that's truly how I look back at previous generations in this business.
Yeah. It's hard to do, right? Especially as a competitive person. It takes a lot of like self-reflection and growth to get to that perspective and like own that. Because at first, like, I know I've always been competitive. Like, I want to beat everybody at everything.
Yeah.
That's how I used to feel like, and I'm happy I didn't try to do that too much with engineering. So for me and like Jeremiah, I came in and Jeremiah is this like ace of an engineer, like that top 0.01%. And I'm like growing in my career behind him. And I was like, at first I'm like, I could go do that. I'll just try to be. And then I'm like, why would I try to be Jeremiah? Jeremiah is way better at that side of engineering than I am. And like, we have complementary skill sets. So why try to beat somebody when if you leverage your strengths and build, you were talking about you and Greg, right? Like complementary skill sets, risk averse, visionary, execution, all that stuff, having a complementary partner goes a long way.
Yeah, it's huge. You could not do it without it, right? If you think about your business, my business, if all of it was competition and clash of who's going to be the CEO and who gets to be the senior vice president and who gets to drive which car and what, you know, these are the things that have defined family business for centuries, right? Like, honestly, this is what, if I've been in family business peer groups, you want to unpack family business, this is what it's all about. It's fighting about who gets to be the boss and who gets the better parking spot and all this stuff. If you can let that stuff go, despite how competitive we are, and understand how complementary we actually are, for those listening that maybe know my brother Greg and I, extremely different people, but very, very complementary, work really, really well together, because what he's good at, I'm terrible at. And what I'm really good at, he's not great at. And you know what? We stick to our knitting, and we really have figured out a way to be wildly successful and not constantly in competition with each other. And it's really, really important. I think it's a huge pitfall in family businesses where they can't ultimately professionalize the business. It's really challenging. And if you run it like, because at the end of the day, it is a business.
It's a business.
Right? It's not a family, right? Like, you all sit around, watch the football game, everybody's family. But in the business, it's a business, right? So there's a hierarchy, there's a leadership team, there's structure, there's systems, there's processes, all that kind of thing. And that's really, really impactful to being able to actually scale and grow.
I want to take a step back to learn about Greg and yourself in that growth period, say from the 2010, 2012, you see the opportunity to start pivoting to multifamily. You grow as individuals to buy the business and then scale the business to what it is today, which has been very impressive. Yet you had a criminal justice degree. And what was Greg's degree?
Construction management.
Construction management.
He went to Greg's a Wentworth boy.
He's a Wentworth boy.
Yeah.
So construction management degree, criminal justice, some real estate experience in building subdivisions, and you guys have built this development arm of Procopio companies that's growing like wildfire. How did you learn to do that? Like, what steps did you take? Were you investing in education throughout that time back in 2012 today? I know you're an avid reader today, but when did that start? And like, when did you build the confidence to be able to do what you're doing today?
So that's a really good it's a really good question, because I think people overthink this a lot, and they think that they have to have all the degrees and they need an MBA and they have to have all this stuff figured out or they're not going to be successful. That I don't buy into that. So I dropped out of college. I went back and finished college, frankly, only because I, at the time, had a rule in my business that I wanted my management team to have a college degree. So I felt like a hypocrite. So I went back and finished mine. I do not have that rule today, by the way. But so I was always a reader. I was always a self-educator. I always found more value in real-life experiences than I did in the formal education setting. And I know there's different strokes for different folks. That was always me. My report cards said two things from the day I was in kindergarten to the day I graduated high school. They said, every single report card said, achievement below capabilities and missing assignments. because and that honestly today can like define my worldview, right? Like, I was capable of a lot more than I was doing in school, right? And I did just enough to get by so I could go do what I actually wanted to do, was go to work, right? And be out with people, right? And if I could not do a single homework and recapture 2 hours a day in my life and still get a B, I was going to do that. That was just a tactical decision for me. I'll take the B and I won't do a single piece of homework for the entire school year, and I'll go work. And at the end of the school year, I'll have $15,000 in the bank and a B, and I'm perfectly okay with that. And that was really how my mindset was. That mindset tracked all the way through. So when it came time to kind of scale and decide, hey, can we do this? I looked at it. I mean, there was a lot of risk, but I looked at it from a very, very baseline level. If you can build a house, you can build an apartment building, right? It's more complex. It takes more thought. It's more risky, but all the same things are there. A foundation's a foundation. The framing is the framing. The windows are the windows. The plans are the plans, right? All of those pieces are there. And we said to ourselves, listen, we know what we're doing on this level. Why can't we educate ourselves to be able to do it on another level? Were there mistakes made? Yeah, colossal mistakes. The best learning comes from mistakes, in my opinion. It doesn't come from a textbook, and it doesn't come from a teacher telling you about their mistake. I run into this even with my own team. I can tell them about my mistakes. Until they make the mistake, they're not going to have learned it. So for us, it was very much self-education. It was a self-confidence level that we could do this. And then once we had, it's very easy to scale that.
So as you grow as a leader, you've bought the business from your father and your uncle, and you guys start investing in multifamily development. And you're doing the development and the construction at this time of your development?
Yep.
When did you recognize the importance of working on the business? And I'll preface this, something I notice with a lot of real estate development companies is the value of the actual development and the opportunity that you can create in real estate development means everybody is focusing on the deal and not always focusing on the company. You're one of the only, especially let's call it a mid-size scaling development company that's really focused on like the workings of the company. As an avid learner, like I'm obsessed with watching high-powered organizations and leaders, and you guys are somebody I always I'm always watching closely. So when did you recognize the importance to build an actual business that's going to help you achieve your future vision?
So that's a really, really good point, because I think it's really generally terribly done in our business, right? Development is very deal focused. And even because chasing the money means chasing the deals. So a lot of developers are just focused on the payday from the development deal onto the next one. And it's a lot of chaos organizationally in the wake. So for us, that was, I would say we really started to focus on that maybe 3 years ago, maybe not even. I will say when Greg and I, when we first started to scale the business, I mean, we had maybe 6 or 7 employees. In 2016, we have 40 today.
That's on the development side, right?
The whole organization.
So you guys were 7 people when you bought in 2016? Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. That's tremendous.
Yeah. And it had gone up and down over the years because at times we self-performed framing and drywall and we had like really big construction crews. But at the time we bought the business, it was really just family. And there was a couple of key employees. But that was it. I mean, I was a project manager when we bought the business, right? Greg was in an excavator when we bought the business. Like that's not a stretch. Greg was in an excavator every day.
That's amazing.
Greg's truck had utility boxes on the back, right? He wasn't driving, right? So this is where we were when we bought the business. So for us, we were very focused on doing the deals to be able to handle the pay, the buyout and stuff like that, and we weren't focused on the people, right? And frankly, it was so small that we just weren't focused on it. As we started to scale, you quickly confront people issues. And the people issues, if you're honest and self-reflective, typically come down to leadership issues. They're almost all leadership issues. If you're honest and self-reflective, are my issues, right? I own that, right? So once you start to see the issues, you're presented with this kind of inflection in the business. Am I going to plow ahead, chase the money, chase the development deals, and allow chaos to reign in my organization behind me? I'll have high turnover. I'll have employee dissatisfaction. I'll have trouble retaining talent. I'll have trouble getting talent. But I'll still be doing deals. Or am I going to take like an active focus on the business and say, listen, we can still do deals, but we can focus on having a great culture. We can focus on having great people. We can focus on growth. We can focus on education. We can focus on making sure that the level 10 performers vision can fit inside the business vision, right? All of those things, those take very focused intensity. That does not happen by accident at all in any organization. No. So for us, I would say that was probably just when we were going into COVID, we were really starting to focus on that. And then COVID, with all of its other challenges, gave us opportunity to kind of double down in a lot of ways and really focus on what was it we wanted for culture, what was it we wanted for our brand beyond how people perceive us. What is it, and we're still working on this today. I have a whiteboard in my office with, this list of principles, right? Principles being very different than core values. We have core values. We've had those. We love them. But we now, I was asked, by someone, what does it mean to be Procopio? And it actually put me back a little bit on my heels. And I had to think, well, I think I know that answer, but I'm not sure. And it was very self-reflective. And now we have this list of principles. This is what it means to be a Procopio. I can hire and fire on this. They're not core values. But if you're not these things, you're not us, right? And this is a continual process. You never arrive. There's no trophy for organizational excellence. And you could be
not a destination.
You can be Boston Business Journal best places to work, but that's not the trophy. That doesn't mean you've arrived, right? And
correct.
For us, this is a very, very, very intentional focus. And for me personally, I'm now, this, we work on a number of projects together. I'm very, very, very disconnected from day-to-day development work right now. I am on very, very few calls. It has to be generally an existential crisis for me to have to be involved. And I am every day focused on the business. I do a little bit of the capital markets work because it's very relationship driven, but I am focused on the business. My desk right now is covered with stuff relative to the team and the culture and the future and strategic planning and things like that. And there is not a single piece of paper on my desk relevant to a project.
And so for the developers hearing this story and your decision-making criteria of chase the deals, like try to maximize the deals versus the time it takes and the effort it takes to build a business, sitting where you are today, 3+ years into this, are you more excited? Do you see a future with a brighter upside in all areas because you've built the business the way it is today?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Sure. And it's a continual doubling down, right? I would not go back to just chasing the deals.
No, right.
And because at the end of the day, it is chasing the deals, right? You do get both, right? By investing in the culture and investing in your people and investing in building the business and building the enterprise value of the business, which is where a lot of developers just drop the ball and don't even think about it. By investing there, you're enabling them to go do the deals. Right? We're working on strategic planning right now that's going to it's not going to 10x the number of deals we're doing, but it's going to be well over 10x the volume of dollars that we're doing in revenue in a very short period of time. That's not because I've suddenly gone out and chased the deals. It's because I've been pouring into the team. Greg's been pouring into the team. Our leadership team has been pouring into the team that's here so that they can go out and do the deals. Right? And if we've built them to be able to go out and execute, then they're executing on our behalf. They're then doing the deals. We're still focused on building the business and scaling the business, which is really where my passion is. I love building things. I love buildings, but buildings are buildings, right? I don't know. I did a LinkedIn post that everybody busted my chops about not too long ago, telling people to stop using the word iconic because iconic actually means something. And, stick garden apartments are not iconic. I don't care where they are, right? So like we like to think what we do is the best, but what we do is basically a commodity in a lot of ways. We are production commodity people with very few exceptions. And if we're willing to lean into building the business, now we're able to find real meaning in building people up and building lives and impacting families and impacting culture and impacting financial success for our team. That's far more rewarding to me than delivering one or two extra, garden apartment buildings in the burbs.
Yeah, taking the time to invest in building a business and a team, it really helps you hone in on what works. So even as a leader, right? Let's talk about someone if you just stayed around chasing deals. If you didn't take the time to really define your decision making criteria and like how you seek opportunity, where do you see opportunity, or where do you define risk, and what is your threshold? Taking the time to invest in like truly documenting that so that you can teach it to other people, really like hone in what does and doesn't work, and allows you to improve on that, and you can iterate, which means you're going to every year over year you're going to get better at what you do. And I think even as leaders, when we try to just go by the seat of our pants, our own emotions change our judgment even throughout a year. And that's where the mission, the vision, the values, you talk about principles, and building a high-powered organization where you are bringing in level 10 talent, right, and creating this opportunity. They're going to help improve those over time, but you laid the groundwork. And then I'm sure you didn't see, when you bought this business in 2016, I'm sure you didn't see that this was possible today, right?
No.
No.
No, and we had big plans. We had big plans, but nothing compared to what we've been able to achieve or where we know we will be. And I'll tell you, we port to your point of systematizing and documenting and making it something that's transferable to, and we often talk about transferring to another generation, but really transferable to a broader team or less experienced team members, perhaps a different generation career-wise in the business. We've invested heavily in that. I mean, I think last year we spent somewhere around $350,000 in learning and development, right? And these are like very focused, intentional things, right? Courses like Dare to Lead and Communicate with Intent and Entree Leader. These are things that we've poured into people and see the results, right? Like this is not just touchy-feely stuff that we make the team do a stand down once a month and sit through the courses. We've seen a real impact in how they communicate and how they. We've brought in world-class negotiators to teach negotiation classes, right? Things like that. These are it's really impactful in growing people and developing people. And then you couple that with a real systematizing, like how I think and how we approach development, what we want in our buildings and in our product and our resident experience. You couple those things together, you've got something really, really powerful in this industry because no one's doing it.
No one's doing it.
No one's doing it. And the big groups, if you look at like the big REITs, like the big self-performing developers, they all do it to some extent just because they have massive organizations, right? You have 4,000 employees, you have to, but they're just checking a box. There's no meat on the bones there in most of those.
Yeah. At their scale, they're not worried about the big home run on this one deal. They're looking to eliminate risk and just have steady, consistent growth where you guys can be a little bit more aggressive, right? Investing in those people, the $350,000 number for the people that haven't yet invested in really defining what they're about, where they're going, what their values are, right? Like how do they create value? They're just kind of going through the day-to-day motions. It can be hard to see the return on training and development. Once you define those parts of your business, where you're going, what do you need to achieve to get there, what skills are required to be successful in those, right? How do we train and defer and create these leadership? Training and development very quickly become a necessity, and they're not a cost, right, to the business. They are an investment.
Absolutely.
You're never paying for training just to say that you gave somebody training to check a box in HR, right? To say that you can put it on a job ad that we train our people. Yep. It's because you have a direction for the business and you're investing in your people so that they can then execute, right?
Yeah, for sure. And you know, to your point about paying for training, I do pay for training for some things, right? But that's like your OSHA continuing ed, right? That I'm just paying for you to sit there and check a box for the state and hopefully retain some of it,
Yeah,
right?
anything that's
Which we know how that works. Like,
required.
hopefully you've retained some. But when we talk about learning and development, it's how can I shape you as a person or as a leader or as a team member to be more effective in every area of your life, right? A more effective person at home is a more effective person for me in the office,
100%.
right? Right. And if I can affect that whole person and I can impact that whole person, that's what leadership is. Leadership isn't just dragging the business through good seasons and bad seasons, right? We sometimes lose the plot on this, right? And it's like, oh, it's just getting the business from point A to point B. It's not at all. How can I impact my people's lives so that impacted, grown, better person is more impactful in their environment for me? And that's where you're really able to scale.
Yeah, there's data out there that shows like production and judgment at work is significantly down if you're struggling at home, right? So anything we can do to support our people as a whole is a real big positive. A book I read, did you read The Almanac of Naval Ravikant?
I'm in the middle of it right now, actually. You recommended it.
So this conversation, I think about your business in particular. I still think about these things in our business. Judgment and leverage become the big indicators of success, right? So why I say it really matters in your business is judgment and leverage in real estate development. Your upside, not all deals are created equal. So it's finding the right deal, finding the right partner, getting the right terms, and creating the right opportunity. You can have exponential results between deal to deal. And if your team is responsible for finding and executing these deals, investing in them to improve their judgment and ability to see leverage, right, is where you're going to generate the most return. It's not were they sitting down 40 hours a week from 9 to 5 or whatever it was. Like, are they there? You can have big hits in business and especially real estate development, and it comes down to judgment and leverage.
For sure. Yeah. We talk about judgment all the time. Judgment and instinct as being the key assessments that I want to make around someone when we're hiring them, right? What's their judgment look like? What's their instinct look like? Can they act with humility? If I can answer those three questions, I can tell you whether they're going to be successful or not in my business, at least in our organization. I can answer that question.
Awesome. And so I don't think I've shared. I'm assuming a lot of people listening today know who you are, but can you talk about some of the developments you're most proud of over the last few years? I wanted to give a chance to share that, and then next we're going to talk about your 5-year vision, where we're going.
Yeah, awesome. So, so we've done a bunch of stuff. So we talked a little bit at the beginning about kind of what we do, but we do everything from really boutique-y really boutique-y apartment buildings. We just wrapped up a really cool one that I love. It's very small for what we do now. It's only 30 units, but it's in the heart of Winthrop, which is, if you're not familiar with Boston, is this super close Boston beach community. It's actually a peninsula that sticks out in the middle of Boston Harbor. And really, really high barriers to entry. There's no big apartment buildings being built there. So it was a heavy lift to even get this 30-unit deal done. It's a beautiful, spectacular building. And I just love kind of well-executed things if there's good execution. So that one I'm really proud of. And then we did, we've sort of become known locally as the Lynn guys. Lynn is a gateway city, for those that aren't from the area, gateway city, very close to Boston, 7 miles outside of Boston, very gritty industrial past. At one point, it was the shoe manufacturing capital of the world. But as is typical with some of these post-industrial revolution cities, marked by blight and crime and no development and kind of a really gritty backstory. We started investing in Lynn in 2015. We've done 7 buildings there, culminating with a high-rise, a Type 1 high-rise that we did, 260 units in the downtown. And it was one of those projects that when we kicked it off and started doing, it's called Caldwell. And when we started doing it and went out for equity and capital, we kind of got a lot of raised eyebrows, and everybody said, these guys are absolutely bananas. Building this in Lynn, like this is something you build in downtown Boston, you build this in an established market. You do not take a flyer on a high-rise, high-luxury resi building in a community whose moniker locally is Lynn, the city of sin. So that's one we're really proud of. It was wildly successful. We built that building. We sold it about 75% leased up to a real estate investment group on the West Coast. They operate the building now. We've done a bunch of stuff in Lynn. That one's probably the trophy piece that we're very well known for around here. It was really well executed.
Did that feel
But
like a flyer to you?
what's that?
Was that, you said a lot of raised eyebrows, people, did that feel like a flyer?
No,
So how did you look at that
no.
deal you didn't feel the risk that everyone else
No,
was
no, I really didn't.
looking
I
at?
really didn't. And we talked about my risk profile. I have a very high risk tolerance. I actually didn't feel the risk on that deal. I really did not. I tend to look at things very, very logically in a lot of ways, right? And if you look at Lynn, where it's positioned, it's one train stop outside of North Station, which is a major hub in downtown Boston. It has the longest coastline in Massachusetts. It has one of the top 10 beaches in Massachusetts, really in Nahant, but it's right there. It has 100,000 people that live in the core. It has transit. It has grocery. It had that building, that location where that building was, had a 96 walk score. You could get downtown Boston, downtown New York buildings that don't necessarily have a 96 walk score. You put, and it was, frankly, it was affordable compared to Boston from a rent relief perspective, right? People could live there instead of living in Boston, save $1,000 a month, and still be 10-minute train ride from downtown.
How was it relative to Lynn rents?
$1,000 more,
Yeah.
So there was that. But so for us, I look at the path of progress, and I look at surrounding communities and say, why wouldn't this be developed here, right? Whether it happens in a year or in 5 years, progress is coming. Progress does not stop. It may be delayed. Did COVID delay progress? Sure, it did at times, right? Did the Great Recession delay progress? Yes, sure, it did. But you know what still happened? Progress, right? And the Great Recession ended, and progress marched on. And COVID ended, and progress marches on. And these types of communities, for me, I don't view them as inherently risky there. I viewed it no different than any other expansion market, and ultimately we were proven right. Does it still have its challenges? Every place has its challenges. But for me, a lot of the opportunity in real estate is found in being able to think differently than other people. And I have never been a person that follows the crowd. I generally think if the crowd's all doing something, I generally think something's wrong with it, right? That's actually a risk indicator for me. A flag is waving if the whole crowd is doing one thing. So for me, finding opportunity where no one else sees opportunity, that's the name of the game. That's real estate. That's development, right? So finding opportunity where absolutely everyone else is, you're just picking up scraps under the table at that point in time, right? We could talk about how I've grown this business and I'm a mid-sized guy. I still compete with the giants, right? I'm competing with the big REITs. I'm competing with the big guys with billion-dollar balance sheets. That's not me. So for me, I have to go where no one else is. And we've done that successfully. We're down in North Carolina now trying to do that successfully in the same way, right? Where are these hubs of development? What's right outside? What's in the next ring, right? Yeah. Where are people now moving outside of those areas? Let's look there and see what we can pick off for opportunity.
That's a good transition to the 5-year vision for Procopio companies. So you mentioned Southeast U.S., right? Carolinas, Florida. Tell us a little bit about what we could expect from you over the next 5 years.
If you'd asked me this question a year ago, I would have said, why would I go anywhere else? I'm going to stick to my knitting. Boston's one of the best. Boston, I believe, is the best multifamily market from a stability perspective in the country. Why would I go anywhere else? I know Boston like the back of my hand. Why? There's opportunity here. The reality is yields have shifted significantly, and it's becoming more and more challenging to get the development yield that we need to get in these core Boston MSA developments. So that's about a year ago pushed us to start considering some other markets. We looked at a number of markets. We settled for our first out-of-town market being the Research Triangle, so Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, and kind of all of those areas around there. We've since expanded that. We'll look at stuff in all of North Carolina right now. We've also spent some time on the ground in North Florida, Texas, Alabama. Again, looking at some markets that are not the traditional markets, right? You think Texas, everyone's in Austin and Dallas. Great. We're looking at San Antonio, right? We're looking at the northern suburbs where we can pick off of the growth in Austin. You talk about Florida. Everybody's on, recent events notwithstanding, everybody's looking at the West Coast, Fort Myers, Lee County, South Florida, Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Orlando. We're now saying, okay, where in Florida is being ignored? The Space Coast, Cocoa Beach, Daytona Beach, Jacksonville. These are great markets, but they're overlooked by the crowd. Alabama. People raise the eyebrows to Alabama, Huntsville, Birmingham, excellent multifamily markets driven by education, big cities, great lifestyle, cost of living benefits, things like that. That's where we're headed. When we talk 5 years, we have really big plans, right? We just wrapped up some strategic planning with our leadership team, and the numbers are downright frightening if you get scared by big numbers, which is a good thing for us, right? It's motivating. We did this strategic planning with a bunch of our senior folks, came back and shared it with some of the kind of people that have to implement it, right? The acquisitions guys, and they turned around and said it seems kind of conservative. So that to me tells me that everybody's head is in the right spot. I think for us, what you're going to see is a refined focus in a lot of ways. I can't scale. So right now we're doing about $350 million a year in development volume. I can't scale that to $1 billion or $2 billion or $3 billion in development volume doing 30-unit projects.
Nope.
That's just not possible. So we've done that successfully, and as I said, some of the projects I'm most proud of are the smaller projects, but it will be a refined focus on kind of the core institutional space, right? 200, 300, 400, 500 unit projects. It cannot just be Boston. There's not enough meat on the bone here for us to get that opportunity and that yield we need to get. So it will mean being in other markets. That'll present, we talk about building the business, that'll present challenges in terms of how we hire in those markets, how we get culture from here there. Shelby runs our people and culture HR team here. She's actually going into North Carolina. We haven't bit down on a project there. We don't have an office open there. She's actually going down there for a couple of days just to get the vibe, to start to understand how people think, how people work. What does this look like when we actually have to plant a flag and open an office? We want to be out ahead of that because it's very, very important to us. I don't want this bifurcated culture where Procopio in the Southeast is one thing and in the Northeast is one thing. Yes. And in the Midwest is one thing. To some extent, you'll always have that, right? People live differently. They work differently. There's different things that matter to people. You will always have a difference. It's like construction, the office culture and the field. Values, right? 100%. And in construction, this is something we're used to dealing with, right? The office culture is usually radically different than the field supervision culture, right? Because the guys live on the job sites. They come to the office once a month. It's very different. And you try to pull it together and wrap it together to the best that you can. But there's always a difference. And we recognize that in some of these other markets we're going to be going into, but we want to be ahead of it because the culture piece is key to how we build the business for us. And if we can't get that right, then we can't scale.
That explanation of your vision brings back a lot of our conversation that I want to point out. The fact that you have strategic planning, that you've been working on your business, and you see that. You said before, why would I leave Boston? It's one of the best multifamily markets in the country. It's resilient. It's stable. Why would I ever do that? You have strategic planning. You're at 350 million and you start looking at where you want to go. And you're like, there's not enough opportunity here for us to do what we need to do. And you're like, so then we have to look geographically to achieve our vision. And now you start to say, how are we going to do that successfully? And we got to think about culture and team. And that is way more than 1 or 2 or 5 people looking at deals to achieve that kind of success, right? So I want to applaud you for working on the business. It's brought you to where you are today. And it gives me the confidence that you're going to go exactly where you want to go tomorrow. So nice work. I'm going to finish off here with 2 questions to give back to the listeners. What's the top book you've read in 2022?
So I'll be very contrarian here. I read a book that really impacted me, and it wasn't particularly exciting. I read a book called Thou Shalt Prosper, written by a rabbi actually, named Daniel Lapin. And it was recommended to me by someone, and he unpacks, the whole premise of the book is about prosperity and the moral value that business brings to the world. And he really unpacks this concept that has become very pervasive in culture, that wealth is evil and business is evil and investing is immoral and all of these kind of things that run through culture and subtly, frankly, even affect guys like me that are in that world, earn their money investing. We don't realize how impacted by culture we are. Mm-hmm. And he really unpacks this. not really necessarily. Obviously, he's Jewish. He's a rabbi. He doesn't really unpack it from a religious perspective, as much as he just kind of logically unpacks it and really looks at the inherent moral value that business brings to the world. What is the value that I have in my work? Why is my work and my investing have inherent moral value? It was really impactful to me. And I would have said before reading the book, I'm not affected by culture. I don't believe any of that. I know I have value, right? I know that my investing is worthwhile. And I would have had all those kind of cocky answers. But really, you don't realize the impact culture has on us until you sit down and are really self-reflective on it. And he does a really good job of unpacking it. I would say that was the most impactful for me. I'll give one other shout out. I'm a big fan of the Cautionary Tale books.
I haven't read that one.
And so like any of the stuff around like massive, colossal business failures, I'm really interested in understanding what went wrong. So like The Smartest Guys in the Room unpacks the Enron story. The Caesar's Palace coup unpacks the demise of Harrah's, right? There's a bunch of those kind of books out there that I really find a ton of value in, because as you start running a business, you start to understand there are absolutely colossal pitfalls and decision points that you approach in your business every day, every week, that could a year from now be the downfall of your business. The decision points you make today. And I've always enjoyed kind of looking at other people and saying, how did they make that decision? How could they have done that differently? What would I have done in their shoes? So those are the kind of books that I tend to really gravitate towards.
Great recommendations. I'll have to read both of those. I'll put them next on my list. And then lastly, what advice would you give emerging leader in our industry today? Design, development, and construction.
So I think my advice, if you're in a business or running a business or even running a team, right? If you're a leader, understand the value of pouring into your people. Right? I think a lot of times as leaders, we get ourselves confused with bosses and we get ourselves confused with managers. Those are 2 different
100%.
things. And there's a part of leadership that means being the boss, right? Heavy is the head that wears the crown. At the end of the day, I have to make the call sometimes and I have to bear that weight. And there's a part of leadership that is managing people, right? Tactically managing people. But leadership is so much more. And I see a real, you and I have had this conversation before, I see a real deficit in our business in this space. People that understand how to lead people. And you could be, frankly, honestly, you could be a sole practitioner developer. You still lead people. You lead a team on a project. You lead a team of disparate a contractor and an architect and a structural engineer and a civil engineer and some consultants. And they all have different motivations. They all have different
100%.
financial focuses. And it's your job to lead them. Right? And to pull them together to see that project be successful and everyone actually grow as a result of that, right? I think there's a real deficit. I would give people the advice of pouring into their people. Whatever you can do to alleviate the stress and make the day-to-day activities, growth, experience of your people better will pay off in spades for you.
Amazing advice. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for the first episode of Design Development. Mike, can't thank you enough for being our guest today. It's been a great time.
Awesome being on.
Thank you. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Thank you so much for listening. If you found any value in this conversation, please like, share, and comment so we can get the word out to more people. It's the only way these communities grow. We're going to really change the industry. We're a growing community. Would love you to be a part of it. Please connect with us. We're going to be on all major social platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram. So all those links will be in the show notes. Enjoy the day.
Most developers start way too late thinking about this. And I like to say, you don't just build buildings to build them, you build them to sell them or lease them. And so it's important to bring a marketing team in as soon as possible, truthfully. And I think there's not enough emphasis on actually developing a proper positioning for a project, proper messaging, proper branding, but then taking it from there and creating demand from that, driving traffic